The season is officially over, and now the real work begins. In less than a month, free agency opens, and the Detroit Lions can start signing their own players. And let's be clear right away, this roster is nowhere near set to even reach the 90-man offseason limit. The Lions need to sign roughly 45 to 50 players, maybe even close to 60, depending on how future reserve contracts shake out. That means change is coming. A lot of it, we already expect to lose Alex Anzalone and possibly others. Omick Robertson needs to be re-signed or he'll find a new team. This roster is going to look different in 2026. And one of the biggest questions staring this franchise in the face is this: who lines up opposite Aiden Hutchinson? Right now, that answer is nobody. Brad Holmes has yet to draft an edge rusher earlier than the 6th round, unless your name is Aiden Hutchinson or Josh Paschal, and even when Paschal was drafted, there were questions about whether he projected more inside than outside. The Lions still have Paschal and Le'Veon Wazurek under contract due to CBA technicalities and list placements. But that doesn't change the reality. There is no true, proven number 2 across from Hutchinson. The draft capital isn't overwhelming either. The Lions hold a 1st-round pick, a 2nd-round pick, no 3rd, likely a 4th, and then the later rounds. Historically, Holmes has treated edge rusher as a day 3 value position. He drafted players like James Houston and Ahmed Hassan late. He's not shown a pattern of heavy investment here, so if not the draft, then free agency. That brings us to a name that makes a lot of sense when you look at how Brad Holmes operates. A.J. Epeneza of the Buffalo Bills. A.J. Epeneza was drafted in the 2nd round of the 2020 NFL Draft, picked 54 overall by the Buffalo Bills. That same draft year, the Lions selected Jeff Okudah 3rd overall and later took DeAndre Swift. Epeneza has now completed 6 seasons in the league. He's 27 years old and will turn 28 early in the season. Let's talk production. In 2025, Epeneza recorded 17 total tackles, 2.5 sacks, no forced fumbles, and 2 interceptions. Over his career, his best sack season was 6.5. Those numbers don't jump off the page. They don't scream elite, they don't scream game changer, and that's exactly why this fits the pattern. Brad Holmes has not paid big money to edge rushers outside of Aiden Hutchinson. Marcus Davenport was signed for $6.9 million, re-signed later for $4.5 million. Al-Quadin Muhammad made about $1.5 million. Holmes has consistently avoided large investments at this position. Epeneza's projected market value, roughly $6.4 million per year on a 2-year deal totaling around $12 million, that is right in Brad Holmes' territory. Affordable, manageable, not flashy. Now consider this. Marcus Davenport was brought in to be the number 2 opposite Hutchinson, coming off injuries and minimal production. Epeneza, at least, has shown durability. Over 6 seasons, he's missed fewer than 10 games total. That's not injury-prone, that's relatively steady. The Lions are projected to be about $8 million over the cap when the new league year begins. Yes, restructures and releases can create space, potentially $50 to $60 million after adjustments and reserving money for the rookie class, but they still have their own free agents to handle. Khalif Raymond's future is uncertain. Other contributors may walk. This team has multiple financial decisions coming, so when you hear names like Joey Bosa or Khalil Mack, understand something: that's not how Brad Holmes has operated. Big splash edge signings have not been his approach. Max Crosby, that's a media headline. Trey Hendrickson, worth the investment in theory, but not aligned with this front office's history. Epeneza, though, a solid rotational piece, a potential starter, depending on competition, affordable, in his prime, age-wise, not a headline move, but a realistic one. The real question is whether he would be brought in as the clear number 2 or simply depth behind Hutchinson and Paschal. If Al-Quadin Muhammad prices himself out after a career year, the Lions will look for cost control. That's how this front office is built. And remember, this team doesn't just need edge help. There are offensive line decisions looming. Long-term extensions will eventually be needed for cornerstone players. Resources must be balanced carefully, investing modestly at edge while preserving cap flexibility elsewhere. May be exactly what Holmes believes is the responsible play. So let me ask you this. If the choice is between a high-priced splash signing that breaks the pattern or a realistic 2-year $12 million deal for A.J. Epeneza to line up opposite Aiden Hutchinson, which direction do you believe this front office will actually take, and would you be satisfied with that move? Because here's where this gets real for all of us as fans. It's easy to sit here in February and say, go get a superstar. It's easy to throw around names like Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson and imagine what that defensive line would look like. Pairing an elite, double-digit sack artist with Aiden Hutchinson sounds like the final piece to a championship defense. But when you step back and evaluate how this regime is operated, you have to separate what sounds exciting from what is actually probable. Brad Holmes has shown us his blueprint. He drafts premium talent early when it falls into his lap, like Aiden Hutchinson. He invests heavily in foundational positions when he believes the value aligns, but at edge rusher, career, outside of Hutchinson, he has consistently chosen value over splash, day 3 draft picks, short-term veteran deals, players coming off injuries, affordable contracts. That's not speculation, that's a pattern. A.J. Epeneza fits that pattern almost perfectly. He is not a headline grabber, he is not going to lead SportsCenter, but he is a 27-year-old former second-round pick with playoff experience, steady availability, and rotational production in a winning program in Buffalo. That matters. He's been part of meaningful games. He's been in high-leverage defensive situations. He understands what it takes to compete in January. Now let's talk about expectations. If Epeneza were signed, fans would immediately ask, is this enough? And that's fair. Because if he is brought in to be the unquestioned number 2 opposite Hutchinson, that means the Lions are betting on scheme, depth rotation, and internal development rather than elite individual pass rush dominance. We've already seen how risky that can be. Marcus Davenport was supposed to stabilize that spot. Injuries derailed that plan. James Houston has flashed, but hasn't proven he can be a consistent 3-down answer. Ahmed Hassan is essentially a rookie again after not seeing regular season action. Josh Paschal has been versatile, but is he a true edge disruptor? That uncertainty is exactly why this decision is so important. The Lions don't just need bodies. They need reliability. They need someone who can give you 40 to 50% of defensive snaps without disappearing. They need someone offenses have to account for, even if it's not a superstar. Epeneza's 5-sack peak season shows he can contribute in waves. His 2-interception season shows awareness and instincts in coverage drops or tipped ball situations. He's not one-dimensional, but here's the bigger picture: cap management and roster construction. The Lions have looming financial decisions that extend beyond this offseason. Extensions will eventually come for core players. The offensive line must remain a priority. There are potential future investments at positions like center. If resources are poured heavily into one defensive end, something else gives. That's just reality in today's NFL. Holmes has built this team through layered depth and controlled spending outside of premium cornerstone deals. Signing Epeneza at around $6.4 million per year keeps flexibility intact. It allows you to address other needs. It doesn't lock you into long-term risk. It's a move that says, we're improving, but we're not overextending. Now, whether that approach is aggressive enough to get this team over the hump is the debate, because the clock is ticking. This regime does not have unlimited years to figure it out. The expectations are different now. The standard is different. This fan base isn't celebrating moral victories anymore. It's about competing for a Super Bowl, and competing for a Super Bowl often requires bold moves. So is signing A.J. Epeneza bold? No. Is it logical within the framework Brad Holmes has shown us? Absolutely. And sometimes the most realistic moves are the ones fans don't want to hear about because they don't feel transformative. But roster building is rarely about one move. It's about stacking solid decisions over time. If Epeneza walks into Allen Park on a 2-year deal, the question won't just be whether he can get 6 sacks. The question will be whether the Lions are comfortable betting that Hutchinson plus depth plus scheme pressure is enough to elevate this defense into the top tier. So now it comes back to you. If this front office signs A.J. Epeneza as a cost-controlled solution opposite Aiden Hutchinson instead of making a splash for a marquee pass rusher, would you view that as smart team building or as a sign that they're playing it too safe at a position that desperately needs impact? And let's push this even further, because this isn't just about one player, this is about identity. What kind of team are the Detroit Lions going to be in 2026? Are they going to be the aggressive Olin contender that senses the window is open and attacks it? Or are they going to stay disciplined, stay calculated, and trust that steady growth wins out over headline moves? Because signing someone like A.J. Epeneza doesn't just answer a depth question, it signals philosophy. If you bring him in, you're essentially saying, we trust our core. We trust Aiden Hutchinson to be the engine. We trust our scheme to manufacture pressure. We trust our internal development. That's a belief statement. It's not flashy, but it's intentional. But let's be honest with each other. Pressure wins in January. When you look at the teams that consistently advance deep into the playoffs, they can affect the quarterback without blitzing. They collapse the pocket with 4. They force mistakes. They flip field position. That's what changes games. Right now, if Hutchinson gets doubled, and he will, who consistently wins the one-on-one on the other side? That's not a disrespectful question. It's a necessary one. Epeneza, at his best, is a disciplined edge setter who can convert power and clean up when the pocket shifts. He's not twitchy elite. He's not bending the arc like a premier speed rusher, but he's sturdy. He's a stunt sound. He doesn't disappear for long stretches in terms of effort. That has value, especially if your defensive coordinator builds pressure through design rather than pure individual dominance. And remember, sometimes production is context-based. In Buffalo, he wasn't always the focal point. He rotated. He played within a system that emphasized waves of rushers, put him in a different snap share, in a different role. And maybe those 2.5 sacks in 2025 look different in Detroit. Maybe the number climbs. Maybe it doesn't. But the opportunity would certainly expand. The risk, though, is ceiling. If this defense stalls again in critical moments next season, if the pass rush fades late in games, fans will circle back to this offseason and say, that was the moment to swing bigger. That's the weight of this decision. And let's talk about roster balance one more time. The Lions aren't building from scratch anymore. They have star players. They have cornerstone pieces. When you start paying those players, the margin for error shrinks. You can't afford too many expensive mistakes. That's why Holmes has leaned conservative at certain spots. He wants flexibility. He wants maneuverability. A 2-year deal is not a franchise-altering commitment. It's a bridge. It's insurance. It's a calculated bet that doesn't cripple you if it doesn't explode in production. But fans don't celebrate bridges. They celebrate impact. So the tension is real. Smart team building versus emotional urgency. Discipline versus aggression. Stability versus splash. This offseason is going to tell us a lot about where this front office believes the roster truly stands. Are they 1 or 2 bold moves away? Or are they convinced the foundation just needs reinforcement, not overhaul? If A.J. Epeneza becomes a Detroit Lion, don't be shocked. Don't be surprised. It would align perfectly with everything we've seen from this regime at the edge position. Affordable, solid, reliable, no fireworks, just structure. But whether that's enough to push this team over the top is the question that will define this offseason. So I'm putting it to you one more time. If the Lions choose steady improvement over a splash move at edge rusher, are you buying into that vision? Or do you think this is the year they must take a bigger swing? Because here's the reality we can't ignore. Patience is harder now than it was 3 years ago. When this regime first took over, we were talking about culture. We were talking about foundation. We were talking about building something sustainable. Now we're talking about finishing. Now we're talking about maximizing a competitive window. That changes how every move is viewed. If the Lions bring in A.J. Epeneza on a reasonable 2-year deal, the move itself won't be controversial on paper. It will make sense financially. It will make sense structurally. It will fit the pattern. But emotionally, for a fan base that feels close, really close to breaking through, it may not feel like enough. And that's where the pressure on Brad Holmes becomes real. Because once you establish that you can win, the expectation shifts from can you build it to can you elevate it. That's a different level of scrutiny. Every decision becomes magnified. Every missed opportunity feels heavier. Now imagine this scenario. The Lions sign Epeneza, they add a mid-tier veteran somewhere else. They draft for depth, they restructure contracts, create cap space, and keep the books clean. On paper, it's a smart, controlled offseason, no reckless spending, no long-term damage. But then Week 12 rolls around, Hutchinson is being chipped and doubled. The opposing quarterback